Haget Erev Shabbos, everybody. Welcome to Jerry's Corona Contemplations for Parshio Trumah to Tzaveh, Parsha Zachor this week. I'm doing Trumah to Tzaveh together, not really touching much on Tzaveh, only in that it's connected to Trumah, dealing with the Beit HaMikdash. But next week, hopefully, Bezrat Hashem, we'll be focusing more on Megillat Esther. So, Va'asu li Mikdash v'shachanti b'tocham. They will build for me a Mikdash, and I will dwell within them, not within it. Famous. There's the whole famous midrashim and Mamari Chazal dealing with the whole idea that when we make Hashem part of us, He is part of us internally, part of our very being. But more than that, we have to concentrate on the whole idea of a Mikdash, what was contained within the Mikdash, and what it all represents. So let's take a look at the Kelim of the Mikdash. And the Torah in this week's Parsha in Trumah go through the Aron, the Shulchan, the Menorah, the Mizbachot. And let's take a look at each one of them. Of course, central to the Beit HaMikdash is, of course, the Kodesh Kodashim, the Holy of Holies, where sat the Ark of the Covenant, the Aron HaKodesh. And contained within the Aron HaKodesh is the Torah and the Luchot. The Torah and the Luchot, of course, are the central part to the whole Mikdash is the Torah and the Luchot, the mitzvot that are represented by the Aron. The Shulchan represents Parnasa, our sustenance, our ability to survive. And on the Shulchan was the Lechem HaPanim, again another form of sustenance. The Menorah brought light into the Mikdash, and it represents Limud HaTorah. Torah is light. Torah brings light to the world. The Mizbachot, the Mizbeach HaNechoshet, and the Mizbeach HaZahav. The Mizbeach HaNechoshet was where we brought our sacrifices. The sacrifices were brought in exchange for us, right? We would bring a sacrifice because we transgressed, and instead of us being punished, we brought a sacrifice. And in the sacrifice, the animal was slaughtered and cut open. We saw the innards and realized how mortal we are. And we say the Parshat HaKetoret every day. It represents our tefillah. What is a Mikdash? A place where, a house of God. Can you contain God into a house? No, of course not. God, as we said in previous shiurim, God is the force with the capital F. He Male Kala Aretz Kavodo. The entire world is filled with His glory. Why do we need to build Him a house? And of course, like everything, this is more for us than it is for Him. We say that a Beit Knesset is a Mikdash Ma'at, but more than a Beit Knesset, our own homes are a Mikdash Ma'at, a mini Beit HaMikdash, if we run the home correctly. So what has to be in a home? In a home, there has to be mitzvot, Torah, Parnasa. When we say Parnasa, we mean that we are recognizing where our Parnasa comes from. The Mizbachot are representative of our tefillah, of our sacrifices for Hashem. And this is what has to be the central being of any home. And this is why it says, V'asuli mikdash V'shachanti bitocham. If we make our homes a mikdash ma'at, if we make our shuls, our batei knesset, a mikdash ma'at, where we go to actually speak to Hashem, to pour our hearts out, not to shmooze, then God will live within us, and we will be proper representatives of HaKadosh Baruch Hu in this world, as we are charged to be so. This past week, a friend of mine asked me about the whole idea of Amalek being coincidence. And this is a famous Mamar Chazal that I really want to concentrate on, being that this is Shabbos Zachor, where we read Parsha Zachor. Zachor es asher asalacha Amalek. Remember what Amalek did to us and continues to do to us throughout generations. Amalek attacked from the rear. What does that mean? That means that Amalek didn't face Am Yisrael head on. They attacked the stragglers, the weaklings. What was their MO? And when I say Amalek, I'm referring to Amalek in all of their manifestations. Amalek was there to try to entice Am Yisrael into believing that God isn't in control, that there is no God, chas v'shalom, that everything is happenstance and coincidence. Zachor es asher asalacha Amalek baderech b'tzeichem miMitzrayim. Remember what Amalek did to you as you were coming out of Mitzrayim and heading toward Har Sinai. And remember, at the end of Parshat Beshalach, we discussed why did Vayavo Amalek? Because of what happened Berafidim, when with the Maso Mariva, where the people challenged God about the water with the rock, and they said, Hayesh Hashem bekirbeinu emayin. Is there really a God who's in control, or is this just coincidence? And what was the next pasuk? Vayavo Amalek. And we spoke about that. When our faith is lacking, when we are rapeh, when we are weak, refidim, when we are weak in our belief, that's when Amalek comes to remind us. So, asher karcha baderech. Karcha has the word mikra, which means happenstance or coincidence, has as at its root karcha. Asher karcha baderech. Everything happened on its own. And of course, attacked the weakest. Think back a few years. What Amalek did in Europe. Attacking women, children, the elderly, the weak, people, not an army. The Jews in Europe didn't have an army. They weren't taking on the IDF. They were taking on bakers and artists and doctors and their wives and their children. Asher karcha baderech. Where is your God now? Lama yamru hagayim ayeh Elohechem, we say all the time. Right? Rav Amital from Gush, from Yeshivat Har Etzion, talks about in his writings on Megillat Esther. It says that Mordechai told Hasach, Kol asher karahu, everything that happened with Haman. Again, karahu, mikra. Right, this is Amital speaking, and then he said, go tell Esther, the descendant of Karahu has come upon you. Who's Karahu? Amalek. Everything is mikra. So, then, when the whole Amalek thing happened, what Moshe tells Yoshua, it says, God tells Moshe, tell Yoshua to get a bunch of men together, get an army together. Machar, I'm going to go up onto the, Moshe's going to go up onto the rock, and Aaron Zachor, they lifted his hands. Israel wins the war. What's this machar? Amalek's there right now. You gonna wait till tomorrow? What's tomorrow? You don't have time. You wait till tomorrow, everyone's gonna die. No, what does machar mean? Machar means we can see, we see that there's a future. Think about Esther's feast. What happens? She tells Mordechai and Haman to come to the feast, and she tells Achashverosh and Haman to come. Not Mordechai, but Achashverosh and Haman to come to the feast, and she said, Achashverosh says, "What would you like, Esther Amako? Ma bakashatecha chatzia malka v'seyos?" She says, "Come tomorrow. We'll have another feast." She had him right there. What is she waiting for? No, the Jews know that there's better days ahead. It's always darkest before dawn, as we said back in our Mishpatim shir, right? It's always darkest before dawn, but we know that there's more to what we see in this world. There's another plane of existence. There's a future. And just as we said, Amalek tried to take us down and tell us, there's no, you're God. Someone once told my wife, Ruchi, at her job, a previous job she was at, she was working in a school. Wasn't the most, let's just say it wasn't Yeshiva Tiferes Moshe or Chaim Berlin. And one of the other teachers says, you have to let go of your invisible friend in the sky, your imaginary friend, because they knew she was a frum woman. That's Amalek, Rabbosai. That's Amalek. Amalek tells us, don't believe all of this hocus pocus stuff. You're in charge of your own destiny. No, we're not. We have to do ishtadlus. We can't sit at home and expect things just to happen on their own, because our doing is part of our prayer. That's our reaching out. God helps those that help themselves. But asher karcha baderech is the way of Amalek. So when we said machar, whether it was in the case of Amalek in the desert, or whether it was the case of Amalek at the time of Purim, or whether it was the Amalek at the time of World War II, there was always a bright future. There was always a machar. Whether it was going to Har Sinai and being makabel the Torah and going into Eretz Yisrael 40 years later, or whether it was the end of World War II and the birth of the state of Israel, or whether it was the Jews fighting back against the Amalekites at the time of Mordechai and Esther, and then shortly thereafter returning to Eretz Yisrael and building Bayit Sheni. There is always a machar. There is no mikre. If you take the letters mikre and rearrange them, you will have, as Ruchi always points out, my wife, my teacher, who is a teacher, mikre, if you rearrange the letters, is Rak Me Hashem. So, when we read Megillat Esther, we could pass it off as mikra. It could very easily read like a Shakespearean palace drama, a Shakespearean court drama. You have Achashverosh and the queen, she dies, they get a new queen, Haman wants to kill her people, Mazel Tov, she's Jewish, and everybody's saved. Nowhere in Megillas Esther is there a Yud Kei Vav Kei. Nowhere in Megillas Esther is there an Elokim written, but he's there the whole time, behind the scenes. And that is the machar of the Jew, the believer. We know there's a machar, and there is no mikra, even though it could easily be read that way. But there is no coincidence. There's no mikra. There's Rak Me Hashem. Shabbos Makar HaBracha. Shabbos Zachor this week, Rabbosai. A lot to talk about at the table. Talk about the ideas of Jewish survival, the secret of Jewish survival, the Torah, and of course, from the Torah, the Shabbos. More than the Jews have kept the Shabbos, Shabbos has kept the Jews. By the way, that was said by none other than Menachem Begin. I learned this from my brother-in-law David this week. He's actually researching some of this stuff. And when El Al stopped flying on Shabbos, Menachem Begin gave a speech about the importance of how the Israeli airline cannot be Machal Shabbos, because throughout the generations, more than the Jews kept the Shabbos, Shabbos has kept Am Yisrael. Shabbos Makar HaBracha, Ein Yisrael Negalan Ela B'Schos HaShabbos. Shabbos Zachor Abosai. Have a wonderful Shabbos, and let us go together into Purim, celebrating, hopefully, the end of this terrible virus. Shabbat Shalom, everybody. Have a great weekend and a great Shabbat.